So I just got done watching the beginning of a performance that Lady Gaga gave at the 2023 Oscars, and there's a backstory to this. So it began with me wanting to do a video on secondary progressions. I was like, that's the next one I need to do. So it put me down this rabbit hole of, okay, what chart am I going to do? And Lady Gaga popped into my head eventually after a few other ones. And so I was like, okay, well, what's going on for Lady Gaga now? What's she up to? So I put her name into Google, I searched, and this video came up. Hold My Hand was the name of it, and it was a performance she did at the 2023 Oscars. So I haven't seen it, or I hadn't seen it. So I watched the video, I watched the beginning of it, watched a good part of the music video, but the beginning part really caught me. And I think part of it is my own journey. Like there's kind of like this intersection going on of my own journey with expressing her journey and then looking at her natal chart and being able to see it in her natal chart. And so it was not something I experienced. I just wanted to bring up her chart to do this secondary progressed video, which I'm doing. I'm going to talk about secondary progressions, but I'm going to link that video below if you haven't seen it. I would maybe suggest that you watch it, which is a projection on my part. You don't have to watch it, but me watching it brought me to her chart, which brought about me being able to see kind of her reality through her chart. Then I then I added the secondary progressions onto it. So all of that to say, I'm going to start this by doing a quick little connection between the beginning of that video and her natal chart. And then I'm going to switch to the secondary progressions piece, how you can look it up, what programs you can use, what does it mean? So with that, let me share my screen and bring up Lady Gaga's chart. So here we go. This is Lady Gaga's chart. So if you watched the video, if you've seen it, you've watched the Oscars and you saw her performance there, it was kind of like these bells were going off for me, which usually happens for me. The astrology chart just brings forward messages for me. So just in that beginning clip, where do I want to go with this? Well, the first thing that jumped out to me when I pulled up her chart after watching that clip was, oh, yeah, I see it. All of this energy here. So Pluto, the South Node, and the Moon in the fifth house. I mean, talk about emotions. That's the signature of emotions right there. And from an evolutionary astrology perspective, a fifth house Pluto in Scorpio conjunct the Moon and the South Node. So the first thing that jumped out to me is the fifth house Pluto. I'm like, oh, famous. That's a fifth house Pluto signature. It could be you've already had other lifetimes of being famous. So I'm like, yeah, check. And it's conjunct her South Node. So she's comfortable there. She maybe was famous in a past life. Who knows, right? But then I saw Pluto in aspect to the Moon, and the Moon being, it's really, if you look at, you would start at Pluto and then go to the Moon. So it's like an Aries energy. It's a brand new cycle for her in her development, which is trying to navigate and figure out strong emotions. And with it being connected to the South Node, potentially things from the past, her soul memories of the past, which are coming through. So there's this lifetime of trying to be able to acknowledge her emotions, express her emotions, maybe project her emotions, get angry, receive anger, you name it, right? I'm talking about this in relation to what I know about Lady Gaga. Now, I don't know much. I know I really like her music. I like her individuality. I like that she's just out there and she is just this amazing, huge, unbelievable performer. And so I see that part of her and I look at this chart and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I can feel there's been a lot of emotional stuff without getting into details that she's been through in her lifetime, which is part of her soul's journey here in this lifetime. And then I saw Chiron in Gemini in the 12th house. And I felt that's the wounded healer, right? So there's something there, but it has to do with communication, speaking. So that jumped out to me there. And there's an inconjunct with all of this energy here with Pluto, the moon, and the south node. So a disconnect in terms of being able to communicate her emotions is what's coming through for me. That may have been an imprinting from past lives, is she maybe was not allowed to or wasn't heard in some form or fashion, which may have been the case early on in this life, but certainly she's finding her voice in this life and projecting that out into society, especially with all of this energy up here in the 10th house. Mercury in the 10th house, Jupiter in the 10th house, the sun in the 10th house. The other thing that popped out to me was her Mars there with Neptune in the 7th house. So in the 7th house is relationships. And Mars in Capricorn soul, which I share that with Lady Gaga, a Mars in Capricorn is breaking free from any restrictions that you may feel from a soul level that was imprinting from the past, or it could be normally it's coming into this lifetime in some form or fashion in the childhood experience, in the childhood environment. So part of her soul's journey and stepping into emotional well-being and being able to help heal others, which she's certainly doing through her music, is to break free from any restrictions through her lifetime. Any kind of containers, any kind of limiting beliefs, any kind of influences that try to prevent her from expressing herself, it's not going to work. And especially with Mars, Mars can express anger. Mars is separating. Mars is, I need to go my own way. Baby, I was born this way. Isn't that a song that she had, right? So that's the energy that she's working through in this lifetime. The other big one that ties into this line that she used in the beginning of that video is I was drawn up here to that north node in Taurus. So Taurus is the opposite side of Scorpio, and Taurus is representative of Venus, but it's your self-worth. It's how you value yourself and being able to find a strong, stable place within you that can never be shaken by anyone. And I was drawn to that when she said this line in that video. She said, you might find that you can be your own hero, even if you feel broken inside. And I had an emotional reaction to that. And I instantly got drawn to that North Node in Taurus. And I'm like, yes, she is to a T, just in that statement, talking about this energy opposing her North Node in Taurus. Like mic drop, literally and figuratively, mic drop. That's what she's describing right here. So I didn't intend on going into her natal chart, but I really felt strongly that I wanted to articulate what I was seeing here in this chart, and maybe it'll help somebody, since I feel strongly about saying that. Maybe you have strong Scorpio Taurus placements, or a North Node in Taurus, or a Mars in Capricorn, or a Chiron in Gemini, where this can be helpful in some way. So back to the regularly scheduled programming. So secondary progressions is a technique where you can look at your natal chart and see how your energy has progressed over time. So if you look at your natal chart and now maybe you are, let's say, 32 years old. So the energy of your natal chart is always going to be present through your lifetime. You're always going to be working through the lens of that energy. But looking at secondary progressions, you can fast forward 32 years and say, okay, well, how has my psyche changed over time? How am I relating to that energy of my natal chart? What's different for me now? So the concept is like, let me actually just pull up Lady Gaga's chart here. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to explain it. So here's the concept. The concept is, let's say you were born, let me just get her details here. So she was born March 28th, 1986 at 9:53 a.m. in New York, New York. And so the concept is, if I looked at her chart, or if I looked at the chart in New York, New York on March 29th, 1986, that would represent the energies for her in the first year of her life. If I looked at March 30th, 1986 in New York, New York, I would get the energy that she was living through, or the change in her psyche in the second year of her life, and so on and so forth. So using the example of 32 years old, I could pull up a calendar and say, okay, 32 days from March 28th, 1986 in New York, New York, what does the energy look like? That would be representative of the change in the psyche. And so if you own, I'm going to show solar fire. If you own solar fire, which is less likely, if you own solar fire, I'm going to show a quick tutorial on how to pull up secondary progressions. And then I'm going to switch to an online resource, AstroSeek, and show you how you can do it there. Okay, so we're here at the solar fire main screen. I've already pulled up Lady Gaga's chart here in the calculated charts, and now I want to see her secondary progressions. So I would go up to chart on the toolbar. I would go to transits, progressions, directions, and select that. Then I would come to this screen where I can click this button that says now to set it at this exact time, or I can change that time to whatever time I wanted. If you wanted to go back in time or you want to go forward, you can modify this date and time here on the left-hand side. Then on this right-hand side, I use natal location. I don't change it. So say you were born like Lady Gaga was born in New York, New York. If she's living somewhere different, I can select relocated and I can put the relocated location in there. I used to do that. I don't do it anymore. I keep the natal location because I read a chart from a soul's perspective. So when you incarnate in this reality, wherever you took your first breath is your energetic expression. And regardless of where you move to, that's always consistent. So I use natal. If you feel called, you can select relocated, and down here in place, you can select whatever the place is where the person or yourself is living currently. I'm going to leave it at natal, and then make sure where it says chart type to generate, secondary progressed is selected, and then click OK. And then it creates another entry here. So I have her natal chart and I have her progress chart. And then I would go up to view, select by wheel. And then the inner wheel, which is highlighted here under selected charts, I would select her main chart, which is her natal chart. And then the outer wheel, I would select progressed and then click view, which will bring up this chart, which has her natal chart in the middle. It has her progressed planets on the outer ring. So that's solar fire and how to bring this up in solar fire. So let's change directions, and I'm going to step through how to do this on astroseek.com. So I'm here on astro-seek.com, and I will put a link to this website below in the description box of this video. This is an online resource you can use if you don't have solar fire and you wanted to check out your secondary progressions. So on this main page, you would go to the first entry here on the toolbar that says free horoscopes, and there's an entry down here for secondary progressions. So you would click on that. It'll bring you to another page. And if you scroll down a bit, you'll see here where you can enter the data. So you would enter your birth chart data. I'll just leave it the way it is. I'll select a random time, 3:05. Let's put a city in here. We'll just do New York, New York. And then on the bottom, you can put the progressions date. So what date do you want to see the secondary progressions for? I'm going to leave it today's date. I'm going to leave the angles and directions on default exactly the way they are. So by default, I myself use the porphyry house system when I read charts. By default, AstroSeek uses Placidus. If you wanted to change the house system, you can click here where it says extended settings. And here on the left-hand side where it says house system, you have your choice. You can pick which house system you want. You can do Placidus, you can do whole sign, you can do porphyry, you can select a different house system. But by default, it's Placidus. So I'm going to leave it at that. So we have a date in there, we have a time, we have a place. So we hit calculate progressions. So it brings up the progress chart, and you can click on it to make it a little bit bigger so you can actually see it. And it's oriented a little bit different than solar fire. It has the natal chart in the middle, and it has the zodiac signs around the outside of the natal chart. And then the progressed planets are along the outer ring. So that would be the progressions. So that's a way for you to do it online if you don't have access to a local program. So let's go back to solar fire, and then I can talk through what the heck does it mean? Why would I use secondary progressions? So when I use secondary progressions, I don't use them all the time, but I use them to see how things have progressed, or how, like I said in the beginning, how your psyche's changed and how you view the energies of your natal chart. So her natal chart is in the middle. The progressed planets are on the outside. And there's a few things that my eyes instantly get drawn to, and it's the inner planets, well, the luminaries, the inner planets, and any changes in terms of my natal planet is retrograde and now progressed, it's moved direct, or vice versa. I like to look at those. And so what does all of this mean? So we'll use the sun. We'll start with the sun. So her natal sun is in Aries in the 10th house. So she's always going to be an Aries sun. That's not going to change through her life. But her progressed sun is now over in Taurus. So that means to me, if I look at that, or if you look at your own chart, Aries is instinctual. It's go for it. It's a trailblazer. It's somebody that needs to go in their own direction. And it can be somebody that sets an example for somebody, and somebody can point to them and be like, yeah, wow, holy crap, that's amazing what they just did. That's awesome. I want to do that. Or I want to learn my own unique way of doing that. So that would be just foundational Aries energy, right? There's a lot more I can add to that, but that's just foundational. The sun progressing in the Taurus. So the sun is the fuel you run off of. It's like you have to do things in that area to light you up. It's your energy. And so now it's progressed into Taurus, which Taurus is the sign of stability, grounding, earth energy, understanding who I am, being able to articulate that, being able to put my roots somewhere, being able to understand what I need and making sure that I have that. That's Taurus energy. So I can see if I was to sit with her and she was sitting in front of me right now, be like, oh, it's probably really important for you to find some grounding and express yourself and surround yourself with things that you enjoy and that you like, and removing yourself from things that you don't. So then we can go to the moon, which is natally in Scorpio. And now it has progressed up into the 10th house, into Pisces. She's always going to be a Scorpio moon, conjunct Pluto, conjunct the South Node. But now her moon, the moon is personal. It's your emotions. It's the things that you value. And it's also the lens that you're looking at life through. So when I see a progressed moon in Pisces in the 10th house is how you're seen out in society. That song that I linked in the description that I'm talking about is clearly a representation of taking her personal self, moon in the 5th house, and bringing it out in a creative way, Pisces ruled by Neptune, in an artistic way out into society. So she's taking that Virgo moon out into society. Check. I would say that's for sure. There's more to this. This is not just it, especially when you're talking about the sun and the moon and their progressions. There's a lot deeper interpretation here. There's the lunar phases, which you look at the distance between the progressed sun and the moon. So you would always start at the sun and go counterclockwise to where the moon is. So I can see in the larger chapters of her life, she's in a balsamic phase. She's wrapping up a very large chapter of her life. She's releasing things that were part of her prior years, like 28, 30 years. I don't know. I'd have to actually look at it, but this is a large chapter of her life that is closing out, releasing the old, getting ready for the new. And again, there's more there with the sun and the moon, but I'm not going to get that far into it. I want to cover some of the other interpretations. So the next place I go after the sun and the moon is to Mars and Venus, the relationship energies. So her natal, again, is in Capricorn, which I talked about, is releasing herself from any restrictions, especially when it comes to relationships, 7th house, and it's blending energies with Neptune, which is could be a more spiritual orientation to this, or it could be just getting information or feeling deeply the energies of other people that she's in relationships with, and maybe potentially getting lost in those energies or not understanding what's hers and what's another person's. That can be part of this energy too. But that's more for the natal chart. The progressed Mars is still in Capricorn. So there wouldn't be much I would read into that other than if it was conjunct a transiting planet or it was conjunct another planet in her natal chart. It's not. It's 16 degrees Capricorn. It's still in Capricorn. It's still in the 7th house. So I wouldn't say within her psyche there's too much change there. She's still breaking free from any restrictions. Then I would go to Venus. Her natal Venus is in Aries. But her Venus in progressions has now moved to Gemini in the 12th house. And it is conjunct her natal Chiron. And remember, I talked about Chiron and that in conjunct with the energy down here in her natal chart, there's some kind of wounding there, whether it was in the past or it's in this life. There's some kind of wounding, and it's tied to communication because it's in the sign of Gemini. And if I wanted to go a step deeper, not to get too crazy here, but the ruler of Gemini is Mercury, right? Sorry, that's the progressed Mercury. Well, that holds significance too, but in Aries. But I'm going to back up here. I'm going to go to her natal Mercury, which is here in the 10th house. So maybe creativity Pisces, or getting downloads of information, or getting information as she's younger and maybe voices it to her family, and her family is like, that's just weird and crazy. Just it's just your imagination. You're imagining things. And it's like, well, no, I'm getting this information and it feels true to me, but I'm stating it. And the feedback I'm getting from my environment is suppress that, right? Or it's not real. Just go away, right? Or something along those lines. And so now her progressed Venus is next to that Chiron. So it's going to be important for her maybe to call in relationships that can help her to process anything that maybe is still painful for her, or maybe something that was wounding for her in the past or coming into this life. The other expression of that is I am going to, again, this connection here, I'm going to communicate my experience within relationships that were deeply impactful on an emotional level out in society. Check. I would say that that's pretty accurate there. And so that's the power of secondary progressions. It's adding this additional layer to the natal chart. So just looking at Mars and Venus, I could say she's still breaking free from restrictions with that Mars and Capricorn for sure. That's still within her psyche. I'm still trying to navigate that and break free. Or she has had enough experience already where Capricorn for me always turns into the authority through experience. So if she's had enough experience and she's broken free enough to where she feels stable and secure within herself, she is now somebody that maybe will attract other people to her, where she can be an example to others in terms of how to break free from their own restrictions. Can be a symbol of a Mars and Capricorn soul. So it doesn't always necessarily mean she's still breaking free from restrictions, although I feel that's the case with her. But it turns into wisdom. And she certainly, through her experience, even if she's breaking free from restrictions still, she carries a lot of wisdom from her experience, regardless. And then her Venus next to Chiron. So maybe drumming up some stuff within relationships to make them come to the surface for her to articulate them, which is very, very much the case is what she's doing through her music, right? That's being expressed through her music. Then I like to look at Mercury, which is in Pisces here up in the 10th house, but it's progressed now to Aries in the 11th house. So Pisces is always active, but now there's an Aries flavoring to it within her psyche, which is doing me. And it's conjunct her natal Venus. That plays into the energies I was just talking about. Singing in public, being known, being famous in public, and being able to voice what's really important to her, Taurus energy, out into society. Check. There you go. So that's where I get drawn to when I look at progressions, and how you can look at this in your own chart is the luminaries for sure, and then Mars, Venus, Mercury. The outer planets aren't going to move very quick. If you look at your natal chart and then you move it forward 20 days, 30 days, 40 days, 50 days, chances are that these outer planets are only going to be a few degrees away, right? If you look at Neptune, the thing I saw here that's raises my radar a little bit is her natal Neptune is at 5 degrees Capricorn. Her progressed Neptune is also at 5 degrees Capricorn, but it's red in my program, which indicates it's now retrograde. So her progressed Neptune goes retrograde. So for me, I would say like, oh, there could be more of a spiritual orientation to her nature at this period of time, or a more inward a more feeling into what she's getting. Like maybe what I'm getting is this Chiron here in the Neptune house in the 12th house, where maybe she felt certain ways or she felt certain things or got some type of guidance where she shared it and it wasn't cool to do that. With Neptune going retrograde, that can be coming to the surface and she could be becoming more aware that, oh, yeah, I am getting information. I am downloading stuff that is valid and I need to express it. Right. Or it could be she could be healing a lot of stuff within relationships, can be a representation of a retrograde Neptune. But Neptune retrograde is more really tapping into the crown chakra. So that can be active for her. And if I really wanted a deep dive, I would actually step back. You can use, if you're familiar with an ephemeris, you can just pull up an ephemeris too, as another method you can use rather than a software program. Is I'd pull up an ephemeris for 1986 and I would go back through it and I would look and say, when did Neptune go retrograde? That will tell me at the exact year in her life that that change took place in her psyche. So that's the next layer to this. Let's look at some of the other outers here. So we have Saturn as the bridge, right, between the inner and the outer. So 9 degrees Sagittarius, progressed is at 8 degrees. Not much of a change there. Uranus at 22 Sag, progressed Uranus at 21 Sag. Jupiter at 8 degrees Pisces has progressed to 16 degrees Pisces. The significant thing here is it's now conjunct her natal Mercury. Yes, out in the 10th house in society. Expansion, expanding her voice in society. Check, that's going to be important with her. It's in her psyche. Jupiter, Pisces, conjunct her natal Mercury, communication. Chiron's gone up 2 degrees, 12 degrees. Gemini, not much there other than in her progressions, it's blending with Venus, and Venus is conjunct her natal Chiron. So certainly there is symbolism there. And then Pluto is natally for her. Her Pluto's retrograde. In progression, it's retrograde as well. It's just backed off a degree to 5 degrees. So there's nothing really significant there. So with these progressions, it's adding the Psyche layer. And the Psyche layer is however we change our view of things and how we start navigating our energy and where we start pointing that natal energy towards is going to change us internally, which will affect our external reality. So it could appear as if things externally are coming to us, which are causing changes within, but it's always playing off of one another. There could be internal changes within me that I can see in my secondary progressed that have now changed my external circumstances or vice versa. So that's what I have here. That's what I wanted to bring forward in this video, is to introduce secondary progressions. If you have any suggestions or any feedback or other things that you want me to cover, or you have questions, you can certainly comment below and I will answer them as best I can. So as always, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. If you wanted to follow me on some of my other platforms, I will have a link to my website below. If you click on that link and go to my main website page, you'll see all the other links for all the other social media platforms if you wanted to follow me there as well. Thanks so much, and we will talk again soon.